What if I told you that Invincible's most brutal fight wasn't against Omni-Man? That there was a battle so bloody, so one-sided, that it made Mark's clash with his father look merciful by comparison? Enter Conquest, a warrior so terrifying that even the Viltrumites respect him. He's not just a soldier, he's a butcher, a conqueror who has raised entire planets, slaughtered heroes stronger than Mark, and lived to tell the tale. The scars on his face aren't wounds, they're trophies, proof that he has endured more pain than his enemies could ever inflict. To him, there's only one law: the weak must be destroyed. For Mark, this wasn't a fight, it was survival. A desperate attempt to stay alive against an enemy who didn't just want to beat him, he wanted to break him. And from the moment the battle began, one thing became painfully clear. Mark never had a chance. For centuries, the Viltrumite Empire has followed a single, brutal philosophy: conquer or die. They are not just warriors. They are a species of predators, bred for war, conditioned to see weakness as an infection that must be wiped out. Earth was never supposed to survive their attention. When Omni-Man, one of their strongest warriors, was sent to conquer the planet, the mission seemed routine. But then, something unthinkable happened. He defected. He turned his back on the Empire and abandoned his duty. And that was unforgivable. The Viltrumites don't tolerate betrayal. They sent Conquest, not just to assess Mark Grayson's strength, but to make an example out of him. If Invincible could be beaten, no, crushed, then the message would be clear. Earth was still nothing more than a planet waiting to fall. And if Mark refused to submit, then Conquest would do what he always does: erase him. Mark knew a fight was coming. Ever since his father's betrayal, he had been preparing, training, pushing his body beyond its limits. But nothing could have prepared him for Conquest. The moment Conquest arrived, the air itself felt heavier. There was no grand speech, no intimidation tactic, just a stare. A stare that told Mark everything he needed to know. This wasn't a test. This was an execution. Conquest wasn't like Omni-Man. Omni-Man hesitated. Conquest never would. He had no patience for sentiment, no sympathy for Mark's inexperience. He saw Invincible not as an opponent, but as an insult, a child pretending to be a warrior. Mark clenched his fists, his mind racing. He'd fought Viltrumites before, but this was different. He wasn't just up against a stronger fighter. He was facing an opponent who had spent centuries perfecting the art of destruction, someone who had torn apart planets and walked away without a scratch. And yet, Mark stood his ground, because if he didn't, Earth would burn. Then Conquest smiled. It wasn't a smirk of amusement. It was the grin of a predator who already knew how this fight would end. And then he attacked. The first punch landed like a meteor. Mark barely had time to react before Conquest's fist crashed into his face, sending him hurtling through the sky. The sound of breaking bones echoed before Mark even hit the ground. He barely managed to stay conscious as he plowed through a city street, carving a trench through asphalt and steel. But Conquest was already there. Before Mark could recover, an iron grip wrapped around his throat, yanking him into the air. "Is this it?" Conquest sneered. His voice wasn't angry, just disappointed. "Omni-Man's son? Earth's protector?" He tightened his grip. "Pathetic!" Mark kicked, punched, struggled, nothing. Conquest was unmoved. Then, in a blur, he slammed Mark into the pavement so hard the shockwave shattered windows for miles. Mark had fought powerful enemies before, but this was different. There was no struggle, no back and forth. This wasn't a fight, it was a slaughter. Desperation flared. Mark's body, running on instinct alone, lashed out. With a burst of strength, fueled by sheer survival instinct, he drove his fingers into Conquest's face and took his eye. Conquest roared. Blood streamed down his cheek, and for the first time, he looked angry. But his fury only made him deadlier. He struck Mark with a force that sent him crashing through a building, leaving him limp in the rubble. Blood pooled beneath him. Mark's vision blurred. He tried to move. Conquest crushed his arm beneath his boot. "You're not strong enough, boy! You never were!" Then a pink explosion of energy erupted between them. Conquest staggered, his grip loosening just enough for Mark to lurch away. Adam Eve hovered in the air, eyes burning with power. "Get away from him!" Conquest smiled. "Another one!" Good! Maybe you'll put up a fight. Eve didn't hesitate. The ground tore apart beneath Conquest's feet as she unleashed everything she had. Buildings warped, steel bent like paper, the air itself trembled. For the first time, Conquest looked surprised, and yet he laughed. But just before he moved, something unexpected. A small cut formed on his cheek. His eyes narrowed. Not bad. Then, in a blink, he was in front of her. Blood sprayed. Eve gasped. A massive wound ripped across her torso. She fell. Mark screamed. His body ignited with fury, his pain forgotten. His punches came harder, faster, fueled by something deeper than strength. Rage. But Conquest? He just kept smiling, because even now, he knew, Mark never had a chance. Mark couldn't feel his body. Every nerve was on fire, every breath a struggle. Blood filled his mouth, and the world around him blurred. Somewhere in the distance, he could hear people screaming. Buildings had crumbled. The city was in ruins. He had lost. Conquest stood over him, barely injured. His grin hadn't faded. If anything, he looked disappointed. I expected more. He reached down, grabbing Mark by the jaw, forcing him to look into his cold, pitiless eyes. Your father put up a better fight. That cut deeper than any wound. Mark tried to move, but his limbs refused to respond. He had thrown everything he had at Conquest. It hadn't mattered. Then, a noise. A sonic boom. In an instant, Conquest was gone, pulled away by a force stronger than even him. Reinforcements had arrived. The battle wasn't over, but Mark was done. As darkness closed in, only one thought echoed in his mind. How do you protect a planet from something you can't even hurt? Mark had been broken before, but this wasn't just defeat. This was a warning, a reminder of what was coming. The Viltrumites wouldn't stop, and next time, there might not be a rescue. Conquest was gone, but his presence lingered like a scar across the earth. Cities lay in ruin. Thousands were dead. And Mark? He wasn't just beaten. He was changed. This fight wasn't just a battle. It was a message. The Viltrumites weren't done. They weren't going to stop. And next time, Mark wouldn't be fighting just one warrior. He'd be facing an entire empire. Omni-Man had warned him. The Viltrumites always come back. Mark had survived, but survival wasn't enough. He needed to be stronger, faster, smarter. Because Conquest had proved a terrifying truth. Mark wasn't ready. Not yet. But one day, he would have to be. Because war was coming. The full might of the Viltrumite Empire would descend upon Earth, and when that moment arrived, Mark would either stand as Earth's greatest champion, or he would be its final failure. If you love deep dives like this, make sure to subscribe for more epic breakdowns. Do you think Mark will ever be strong enough to take down the Viltrumites? Let us know in the comments, and tell us, what battle should we cover next? See you in the next video.